Okay, that's good. Okay, very good. Let me just double check this and then we're all good. Okay. Okay. All right. Hello, everyone.
Hey, hello,
So,
Reverend.
round two, hello to everyone. Oh, let me, I'll do a little mute so we can hopefully hear a little bit easier. Yes. Okay. So, why is that happening? Just a second again. Speaker you. Okay. So, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay, very good. I don't know why. 1 second. I don't know why. Just a minute. Just 1 second.
You mute us.
Yeah, I know. Just give me one more second. Okay. I don't know why this is happening. Okay. So no, we're gonna have to switch back to this. Okay. So this week we begin the portion of Naso, is the Torah portion we begin reading this week, which actually we studied last week, because last week we studied the whole portion of Naso, but we didn't end up reading it on Shabbos because Shabbos was a holiday, was Shavuos. So Shavuos always dominates the Torah reading. So we read the Shavuos reading, so we end up studying this portion of Naso for a second week. And one of the things that we find in this week's Torah portion is a very interesting teaching. It tells us about three families that were in the tribe of Levi, that made up the tribe of Levi. So there were three families that made up the tribe of Levi, which had, the tribe of Levi were 22,000 people. But if you brought them back to the children of Levi, the son of Yaakov, you had three families. And each of the families were given different roles in helping to transport the Mishkan, the tabernacle, whenever they traveled in the desert. And so the Torah tells us that there was one family by the name of Kahas, and Kahas had the responsibility of carrying the Holy Ark. And then today, the Torah begins speaking about the family of Gershon. So there's Gershon, Kahas, and Merari. Kahas carried the ark, and I think they were mentioned in the end of the previous portion. And then you have Gershon, it speaks about what they have to carry. And the Torah tells us as well that the princes of all of the tribes came together, and in honor of the inauguration of the tabernacle when it was first put up, they donated wagons, 6 wagons, to assist with transporting, so that they had wagons to put all of the articles of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, into when they transported. However, Kahas, the family of Kahas who carried the ark, they did not get any wagons. So from the three families of the Levite families, one didn't get any wagons, one got 2 wagons, and another got 4 wagons. And that had to do with what they had to carry. And of course, the wonder is, why would Kahas not need wagons if Kahas is also carrying things? And the explanation is that the reason why is because the family of Kahas who carried the Aron, we know that the Talmud teaches us that Ha'aron nosei es nosav, that the ark would carry its carriers. That even though they had to pick up the ark, and the ark had, we know, 2 poles, and they would put the poles on their shoulders in order to carry the ark, ultimately there was no weight that they felt, because ultimately the ark didn't need anyone to carry it, because the ark was actually sat in the Holy of Holies. It represented the very essential presence of God, and God doesn't need support from anybody. So it would actually float. And this was such a powerful phenomenon that there's a well-known story when King David, a few hundred years later in Israel, finally was bringing the ark to Jerusalem. even though the temple was not yet built, his son would build the temple, but he was already bringing it to have a place in Jerusalem, that one of the carriers of the ark, when he saw that they put the ark then in a wagon, in fact, but when he saw that the wagon shook and he thought that the wagon was going to fall, he jumped to catch it, and he died from jumping to catch it, from even having the notion of a thought that the ark does not carry itself. He actually died. He wasn't killed by anybody, but obviously God took his life. That's how powerful this idea and reality was, which is hard for us to imagine, but that was the reality. The reality was that the ark actually carried itself, which is fascinating, a fascinating idea. So what we find is really interesting, something really interesting, that there were 3 articles in the tabernacle that had poles. We know that the table of showbread had poles. We know that the altar, the inner altar, I believe it was, the inner altar had poles, and that was to carry them. When the ark was put down in the Holy of Holies, you would think they would take out the poles. You don't need poles in the ark when it's not traveling. You just need to stick them in when you're traveling. But the Torah says you're never allowed to remove the poles from the ark. You can remove the poles from the table. You can remove the poles from the altar. You're never allowed to remove the poles from the ark. Why would the Torah forbid us from removing the poles from the ark? Well, it's the same reason why the Rambam tells us that when they would light the menorah in the temple, the menorah they would light the menorah, say, with the lamps would stay lit long enough to be lit through the night and into the day. Now, why would they need the menorah to be lit during the day? You don't need light during the day. But that's exactly why the Rambam tells us that the menorah continued remaining lit through the day, to remind us that the light of the menorah was not a practical use. They didn't light the menorah because they needed light. They lit the menorah to bring divine illumination to the universe. That's the reason why the menorah was lit. And so in the same way, the Torah doesn't want us to think that the reason why the ark has poles is for a practical reason, that it needs to be held when they travel. So therefore the Torah says never remove the poles, because you see the poles are even stay in the ark even when nothing is happening, when it's not moving, because the purpose of the poles is beyond just the practical use of carrying. Now this idea is actually a very powerful idea. Why is this a powerful idea? Because Hashem is teaching us something very profound. And that is that we know that when we truly trust Hashem, when we truly trust Hashem, Hashem says, you can trust me. Hashem obviously is the only entity and being that is fully trustworthy, because Hashem is the only being that is all able. That means under any circumstance a person is in, Hashem can be there for you. There's no one and nothing else in the world that can actually say that for you. Only Hashem can absolutely be there for us under any condition. We know that Hashem will be there for us under any condition because Hashem is all loving, benevolent. Hashem is benevolent. He wants to do good. So therefore we know Hashem will always be there for us. We cannot say that about every person. Even people that like us are moody. One day they love us a lot, one day they love us a little bit. So it's all relative, right? So the only person we can truly trust is Hashem. However, we know as well that as backseat drivers, right, who sit in the back seat, and every time the person's driving does something, we get a little nervous, like, oh, watch it, right? Although our driving may not be any better, and it may in fact be a little bit worse, but we don't get nervous when we have control over the steering wheel. But the second someone else has control, we start getting all nervous. And that's because we have a very hard time letting go. And the ark reminds us, the reason why the family of Cush did not have any wagons is because they did not have any weight when they were carrying. Because God says, just let go and I will carry you. Just let go and I will carry you. The hard part is letting go. But when we let go, it's like the ark, which represents the presence of God, where God says, I'm going to carry you. You don't need to carry me. And this is actually true and real. But it's only as real as we're willing to let it be. So it requires the inner strength of letting go. And when we find the way to, with the ability to let go, we experience what the Levium, the Levites experienced when they were carrying the ark. That while they had something which was very heavy on their shoulders, they discovered that there was no weight whatsoever. And not only was there no weight, they felt that the ark was carrying them as they were going along. So we have to remind ourselves on a constant basis that we have the option of living this way. And I'll say that there are an endless number of levels of this. So the more we let go and the more we trust in Hashem, the more Hashem carries us, and the less we have the weight of life on our shoulders. That's the lesson we learned from today's Chumash. I actually have another class later, so that's why I'm being a little bit more brief tonight. At 7 o'clock, I have another class. But if anyone has any questions or comments, please share.